This is John Reed, Diginomica, joined by Esteban Kolsky at Constellation 2025. We just talked about the conference in general and the importance of the AI conversations taking place, but Esteban, since joining Constellation, has been refining these decision intelligence obsessions that you and I both share. And when you started talking about it, you started talking about all the different sources of information you've been gathering with the goal of helping boards and executives make better decisions and all of that. So the obvious thing to comment on now, Esteban, is, well, why can't they just use AI for that and query AI and do their own research? Because the research in AI is so great.
There's two answers. Number one is, I won't tell you that you can't. Go ahead and do it and see what you get out of it.
Yeah.
Right? That's a simple one. There needs to be an understanding of domain, language, correlation. There needs to be a, executive memory for 30 some years in the market that is applicable to actually get into those nuggets of information. Anybody can go and get a summarized document. Your summary means it's absolutely squat in relation to your specific problem, your specific company, your specific industry, your specific situation, even your career path, if you go as deep as that, right? This is all metadata that is both collected as well as, part of the memory of having been in the industry for 30 years.
By the way, I totally agree with you, but just for the sake of having an interesting discussion, clearly
Should I say that you can do it on AI?
No.
Okay, good.
Please don't, because then we'll have to stop.
I spent 2 months developing agents so that I can say that I do something different.
Yeah, please don't, because we'll have to talk about, or I might have to just stop the podcast.
No.
But still, clearly there's a market perception that that's not the case, in the sense that all these analyst firms have taken big stock hits this year. So are you saying that to some extent that's an unfair punishment to them, or is there some reality to it?
It's an unfair knee-jerk reaction to them, but, and this is the caveat, but the analyst firms have been steering away from this process over the last few years in favor of easier to produce content that is far-reaching for commercial reasons. So then it's unfair to say, oh, you're just going to be gone because AI can do it. But it's not unfair to say you will be gone because you reduce the quality of the people that you hire and the process that you undertake to validate and vet the information that you do. And the people that you hire have 3 to 5 years experience versus 13 to 20 years experience, which used to be the case, which means that you don't have the market memory, which is incredibly necessary for this process to work.
And can I add to that a lot of your research is too static and too annualized and not dynamic enough, and
commercial. And let's not forget it.
And too insular.
Absolutely insular.
Too insular.
It's one of the reasons I left Gartner was because year after year, my view of the world kept getting narrower and narrower, and they kept asking me to put tighter and tighter blinders to talk only about one thing. And my brain doesn't work that way. I need to have the whole picture. And the people that I talk to, board, executives, people that are actually making these decisions that we talk about, they need a broader perspective. They don't need to know that, this is happening only in this model and then this is other. Look, it's not that they cannot put it together. Most of these people don't have the time or the staff to help them put it together. Somebody needs to actually take all these pieces and create a model and a conversation framework in which you can have these conversations and get to the right conclusions. It cannot be that the answer is in a magic quadrant. I used to own magic quadrants. The answer was never in the fucking magic quadrant, man. It was a great tool for a certain level of people, but as you go higher in the organization, those tools play zero value. And I know that I'm going to catch fire for this from my friends in research houses, but stepping away from actually having the tough conversations and doing the hard research in favor of pretty pictures and magic quadrants and things that are easy to talk about, it's what actually making a disservice to the value that these organizations have to the executives that need much more value than that. And on the other end of that, it's like, the management houses. I mean, the McKinseys, the Bain, the Deloittes, they produce amazing content, really good content, lots of very credible data from incredible, pools of respondents. But what they do with that is they try to turn that into millions of dollars in fees, trying to implement a strategy that could be done in 2 weeks if you actually were to have the right people looking at the information. So I'm trying to find the step in between them. I don't want to be doing product selection. I don't want to be doing digital transformation projects. I want to help the executives make the day-to-day decisions that's going to help them get to the point that they say, okay, we spent 2 years making these decisions. Now we can do digital transformation. We spent 6 months making the decision. Now we can pick a product. I want to fill in that hole in between. That's what I'm aiming for.
Yep. And in case I release this in 2 parts, you're now doing this as the chief distiller at Constellation Research. And one thing I did want to just briefly mention as a quick disclaimer is that there are some really smart, capable people still at these big analyst firms.
Absolutely.
I know some of them, and to be honest with you, Esteban, I have a hunch in 5 or 10 years, many of them will be off on their own or in smaller boutique firms, because that's kind of how the trend is.
I actually expect them to become strategy officers for private enterprises.
There you go.
That they need to actually understand how to take AI to the next level and use a transformation of the organization. And enterprises that need to transform over the 10 years would do very, very well to find an analyst that is well grounded in the market and use them as strategy officer.
And by the way, the pay is kind of good too. So that's
the pay is fantastic. Yeah. I done it, so I know the pay is fantastic. But it's more than the pay. It's a challenge of taking a company that says we survived 30 years. We're not going to survive another 5 if we don't change the way we do things. And how do we do that? And get somebody who's been trained over 20, 30 years in strategy and have them look at the big picture and paint the visions and then take them forward.
And part of this, then, I think, refers back to one of my top 5 business books of all time, The Challenger Sale, which is all about going into customers and proving that you have better insights into their business than they ever expected, not just selling them something. And so in a way, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you're in a little bit of a challenger sales situation where a customer's probably done some AI-based research by the time you get to them. They probably have experimented.
They've done a ton of it.
And now you're saying, I'm going to bring in what I have, and I'm going to show you how much better this is for your decision-making needs than what you're getting, right? This is the challenge you're embracing, right?
The biggest challenge in what I'm doing is proving the value 100%. Because here's what I usually.
Well, the challenge is more the chance to prove the value, right? Because if you get a chance, you're going to prove the value, aren't you?
I wish I had the chance to prove the value, but I mean, I'm trying to find the chances. But even when I get the chance, the challenge is like, I go against. We get that from McKinsey, we get that from Gartner. Pick your favorite. I'm not picking one or the other, right? We get that from management consulting firms. We get that from research houses. That's the challenge. I'm actually going after I already have the content. What's the value that you bring? And and I've been working for the last 2-3 months to find this framework that actually shows that there's value in stepping away from those areas and finding in a very nitty-gritty way in the middle where context is king and everything that you do is customized to what you need, not based on what some vendor told you that it had to do with an agent for whatever reason.
And so tell us more about what that's been like to get to this point. How are you arriving at this point of providing this intelligence?
I would have to say that for the first time in my life, it's been a really humbling experience. It's me going in thinking that I got everything and then exposing what I've been working on. And you've seen a couple of the versions that I came up with. Great content, not really useful. So then it's finding the usefulness, how to create a useful framework with the fantastic content that I've been able to create.
So what makes you say that the first iterations weren't useful?
They're not useful because I cannot go to somebody and say, oh, I don't want you to read a 60-slide deck from McKinsey. Here's my 25-page report. I'm replacing one impossible with another. I mean, the people that are using this information don't have the time to read through 25 pages. And they will give it to the staff that will put it through ChatGPT, who will destroy the context that I try to be very carefully to build. So then I need to find a way to be more concise. I need to find a way to be more precise, more customized to the specific situation. And it's been humbling to go to people that I know forever that really respect me. And they say, this is fantastic, but I cannot use it in the current form. This is what I need. And they give me a whole laundry list of things. And I take 15, 20, 30 laundry lists of things every month in every report that I produce. And I go back to the lab and I start putting the pieces together and cut this out, summarize this, put this in a different place, create a community, create a website to accompany this, create a newsletter on a weekly basis. Finding all the pieces that come together to create one service versus being just one report. So it's been humbling, but it's been absolutely exhilarating to be provided the ability and the opportunity to work on this. I think that this is truly, honestly, the future for research. This path in the middle that is not covered by nitty-gritty in the weeds details like the research houses produce, or pie in the sky, research like the management consulting firms produce, but something that is tailored to making the decision. If I can do this in the next few months, we're going to see a whole new level of research and a whole new model that if we adopt it, we can take this somewhere.
So let's take a CXO from one of your target companies you have in mind. I don't know if you want to pick an industry or not. What do they need in terms of decision support and intelligence that they're not getting that you can deliver?
So let's take a public use case that I haven't been consulting with, but Walmart created the AI Foundry, right?
Yeah.
The AI Foundry is basically their consolidation of models and resources, so that anybody who wants to use AI can go through the Foundry, pick the things that they need, and create either a new model, a new agent, or something like that, being constrained with the right resources and the right guidelines and guardrails and all that stuff. This is the public model. It's been published many places. People know about this, right? I'm not working with Walmart. I'll be the first one to say. Hopefully I can get the opportunity to have this conversation with them. But what I'm seeing that they're missing is they're making a lot of resources available. They're training their people in the basics, but they're not actually making the connection between what are the outcomes that we're seeking as a business, and what are the actions that will get us to those outcomes. And the problem is people that have been working in corporate America for a while, they step away from that after a few years to get into this rut where they just keep pushing forward in one specific path versus trying to create a broader discovery model, right? So what they're missing is the framework that says, how do we create this discovery model? How do we step away from we've been doing and automating what we've been doing, which may be the answer, but take a step back and say, do we automate? Do we predict? Do we optimize? Do we not leave it alone? Do we do something completely different? Right? That requires a framework that you can say, okay, let's look at this process and let's look at all the aspects of the process, and then say, do we have the right data? Do we have the right metadata? Do we have the right context? Do we have the right resources, the right training, the right people, the right technology? And if we have all these, then what's the best way to actually create a pilot that will give me the answer that I'm looking for in a short time? And then if I get the answer, what's the way to create that framework? How is that framework going to help me to go from that pilot to the first deployment to the iterations that it's going to take to get to the answer? This is not a 2-week or 2-month process, no matter what anybody would tell you. This is a months-long, if not years-long process, but the rewards are fascinating. If you think about taking your company and transforming it, not just digitally, but in an automation spectrum, in an optimization spectrum, so every process runs as its best and is continuously updated and improved. That's the value of what we're talking about here. But you need a framework to do that. You can't just do that because you want to, or do it in the back of an envelope, or do it in a lab. You need something that will guide you step by step. You don't get to create a masterful food without the right recipe, and we don't get to get transformation without a framework.
You said framework, and 4 other words jumped out to me.
Yeah,
I'm going to hold one of them, but the 3 that I'll share with you now: market assessment, strategy, and maturity model.
Yeah.
In other words, how do I advance this, right? How do I move from, I think all of
those 3.
You need all of those things, right?
Yeah,
you need
so
all of them,
you need
right?
all those, but at different levels. You need a market assessment at the director, assistant VP that's making everyday decisions to products and how the market performs, right? You need a strategy. Yeah. And what was the last one that I agree with?
Maturity model.
Maturity model. You need a maturity model at the next level, so you can say, okay, this is what the market looks like. This is what the market could look like. How do we get from A to B? And you need a strategy at the top executive level, which is what I'm trying to focus on, so that you can actually say, now that I know the market looks like, now I know how it's going to progress, how do I take that and align it with my outcomes for my company over the next 5 years?
So that's your main focus, is that strategy.
Building that framework, yeah.
Yeah.
Look, I'm a strategist at heart. I've done strategy for the last 25 years, plus. And I think that strategy is not hard to do, but it requires a certain level of complexity that most people shy away from, because they think strategy and they think 45-page documents with so many details that are useless. I have never written a strategy longer than 3 pages because it's not worth it.
So one of the things you talked about earlier resonated with me, because I pride myself on, every time I try to write a blog, I really try to make something that is craft. I believe in handcrafted stuff. But the hardest thing in our industry over the years has been to write a concise blog, a short one that really hits home.
Yeah.
That's the hardest thing.
Yeah.
I tend to write long, but even then I try to be careful about what I put in, but for me, it's all about the specifics and the details. But there is a place for high level overview stuff, and it is so hard.
Yes.
I cannot tell you all the short blogs I read that are just disposable. It is so hard to do. And so I appreciate your challenge there, and it'll be interesting to see what you can come up with.
It's not a summary. It's concise, which is very, very different.
Yeah.
Concise is not short. Concise is precise. Concise is to the point, and concise is like, with a point and an action to follow.
Right.
Otherwise, it's not concise.
Yeah, exactly.
And I read an excellent article that I shared in LinkedIn a few weeks ago about what is to be concise. And I talked to the lady who wrote it, and she's like, I've been fighting this battle my whole life because people think that when I say concise, it means short. And I read things that are short, that are just summaries. But they don't have, you need,
yes,
to
it's
be
not a
concise,
summary.
you need to combine, to be concise, you need like, the background, the main point, the corollary, the summary, and the action. All those four into a short form in a way that is easy to understand by anybody, regardless of the position, regardless of the situation. If you do that, it can be concise.
Which is really interesting. So my question for you then is, since you've written these longer things, I'm sure you've had AI summarize those things. Can AI be concise, or can it only summarize your content?
You can guide AI to be concise by prompting it, but you're not going to get the value of concise that you expect, because it has the biggest problem here is the lack of context, man. The lack of context, the lack of state. It doesn't know what I did yesterday. I fed into AI everything that I've written in my entire life, from Gartner through now, the last 25, 30 years. Everything's been fed into AI. And I said, whenever you do something, you had to refer to this stuff. And AI, basically Charles is my ChatGPT assistant. Charles said, I can't do that because it would take too much compute power to go through all the content. And I said, okay, then go through all this stuff and create a profile of what is supposed to be into all these writings that we can use. And it took me like 2 weeks to model it into a thing that I can actually feed with every single inquiry when I say, this is who I am as a writer and what I believe in. And this is what you need to base all this stuff in. So I'm actually giving state and context to AI for every inquiry. When I say be concise, this is what it means to be concise. We worked on this for the last 2 weeks. Here's the definition of concise. Here's the definition of like what I'm looking for. Here's the outcomes.
So you put that in with every prompt then?
Every prompt, it has to be part of it,
Yep.
I have in each folder that I create, I have about 6 or 7 files that have all this information. And that's the first thing that I upload. And those are summaries, concise summaries that I build in making them concise over time. So that actually you can use
because they need a short context in those AI windows.
Absolutely. You can't ask it to go and consider everything in context. But the interesting thing is, like, as I started doing this, I also learned that every time that I use it, I need to update it, because it's not going to update automatically. It has no memory.
Nope.
So then I have to, like, everything that I, when I go through a process and I get a result and I say, okay, this was interesting. This is what, I learned from this. I take that and put it into the prompts. And then the next time that I do it is part of the prompting that I do for ChatGPT. If you're willing to do that, it can get you whatever you want.
Yeah.
But my prompts started being like 4 or 5 pages long because there were so many caveats.
Which doesn't work.
Yeah, it doesn't work. So then create a context, create a taxonomy, create an ontology. I mean, you can create an ontology because it has no language understanding, but you can create a taxonomy, you can create a context, you can create a profile, you can create an outcome, you can create an ideal outcome. You can feed all that, and then you can ask the question, and even in the question you guide it, you said, like, this is information that I want you to use, not whatever you have in memory, but this is the specific pieces that I want you to use. And then probabilistically you reduce, this big pile of garbage to a very small, bag of manure that has become useful. And then bag of manure becomes, what I used to distill, and what I distilled becomes something useful. So then that process where I actually learn to do agents over 2 or 3 months, that give me they take me from the 100% to 30%. And then I actually work on the last 30% on my own to actually get to the information that is distilled.
So AI, you heard it here, folks. You heard it here first. AI critic Esteban Kolsky has embraced the use of AI tools in his workflow.
I love the fact that it saved me 2 or 3 research assistants that I would have hired and trained over the years.
Right.
That it took me months instead of years to train them to actually understand what I need.
But I think this is a good example of the compound architecture as I was describing. And in this case, you've constrained the language model and the agent so that it plays a role in your process, but it's not the final output. The final output goes, you distill, in a human sense, you distill what you've taken from that.
Absolutely.
And so you have complete supervision over the output.
And everything that I get from Charles is double vetted and with links to the source. And I check everything that I get because I still don't trust it, even though I trained it over the weeks and there's no memory, there's no context.
And there's no guarantee that all the links are going to be correct or anything.
No, and sometimes I run the same prompt twice and I get very different results because there's no way to actually understand that what I'm looking for is the same that I just did. So it will give me different results. And sometimes I actually want 2 or 3 results so I can actually create a bit more interesting point out of those.
Yeah, absolutely.
But but here's a key question, right? Could I end up in a point where that becomes an AI program or agent that does the work that I do?
Mm-hmm.
I would say maybe, but it's worth the time and effort to go from here to there.
Right.
Probably not, because things change so quickly in our environment that building something that has a specific purpose, it loses its purpose at the very moment that it's
Andre Kaparthy, who invented the vibe coding term. I'm doing a vibe coding panel tomorrow, which should be fun for everyone.
Except for me, yes.
Yeah. Well, no, you're going to like my panel because you know me. But anyway, he talks about autonomy toggles, right? Where the control over autonomy needs to be very specific and personal to your situation and use case, right?
Absolutely.
So you'll figure out exactly how much of a role AI should play in your workflow. One thing that is interesting to me about that is, do you feel like you need to disclose that to clients in terms of the role?
I disclose to everybody how I run the process.
Okay.
Yeah, it's part of the methodology is disclosing that the top 7/10 of the process I run automatically, but the value is not in the top 7/10. The value is in the bottom 3.
Is in the distillation of that information.
Absolutely.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
So,
I have never run anything through ChatGPT that I didn't disclose. I mean, all the projects that I've done, everything that I work with for friends and acquaintances and everything, I say, this is what the process was. I had a conversation, I had a transcript, I ran it through ChatGPT, gave me the talking points, I took the talking points, I added context on my own, I added things to the prompt, and then I ran it again, and with what it gave me, that was 70% done, and then I went and I added the 30% to finish it.
I've written a couple articles on whether the enterprise has a fake news problem the way the consumer market does, and I ultimately came to the conclusion that yes, to a point, in the sense that there is a whole lot of marketing noise. You and I discussed how LinkedIn's become a cesspool of low, kind of low insight conversations,
Right.
And yet the redeeming thing that I think keeps folks like you and I interested in the enterprise is that there are people who care about having successful projects and delivering results. And those kind of people need better information.
Yes.
You can't do that with bad information.
No.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is what keeps us inspired, despite the fact that we can become kind of jaded in our own ways. You and I are both jaded in different ways, but we're both jaded. But what keeps us inspired, correct me if I'm wrong, is catering to those people who really do want to make a difference in the world, but need better information. And this is the thing about our industry that's cool. So what I'm hopeful about is that you're going to develop the proof points around this on companies that are consuming this kind of distilled information and making better decisions and showing results, because it's all connected.
I don't want to build a better mousetrap. I want to build a better blueprint.
How can you have successful projects with bad information? You can't. I don't see how you can.
But here's the thing. The reason that you can't is because we moved the process from being simple and complicated problems to being complex problems. So when you have complex problems, the simple and complicated solutions don't apply.
Right.
And when you go from complex to wicked, then that's even worse.
Yep.
Because what you're losing is you're losing certainty, and you're losing constancy, and you're gaining variables. And then the variables, this is the biggest problem with LLMs. It doesn't work in a variable world. It works in a static world with like constants, not with variables. It's non-deterministic. You cannot have a very complex variable problem that you fit into LLMs because they don't know what to do with it, right? And this is where people like you and I come together, and like actually we create context for those variables to make better decisions. And that's my hope. It's like, if I do this right, as I was saying, I'm not going to build a better mousetrap. I'm going to build a better blueprint so you can build your better mousetrap, using the tools and using the concepts and the frameworks.
There's one other component that I want to get into that you mentioned earlier and to this discussion, which I think is really important, which is this notion of community and networks. And I would argue that it goes deeper. I would argue that it goes into redefining domain expertise around around the concept of being embedded into a network of your peers. So, for example, doing workshops on AI with college students, one of the depressing things is how willing some of them are to abandon their pursuit of expertise because they've been told that LLMs have solved all these equations, solved all this information. It's got the expertise. So there's no need for you to become expert in anything anymore. It's discouraging to have those conversations, but it's fun to try to turn them around. And I think what what I tell students is you need to redefine the definition of domain expertise. It's not just intellectual knowledge. It's how you apply it, how you connect it across disciplines, how you have engaging collaborations with like-minded people. And so I think around this information context, what's going to be so important is the relationships that you build around it, around people who also care about this topic and want to have this kind of content. Because I can envision you having regular meetings with peer groups and stuff like that of people who subscribe to these services who also share how they're using this to an extent. Obviously, they'll keep some of it to themselves. But I think there's enough common ground there to say, like, not just at CCE, but throughout the year, we need to somehow stay connected around these topics and continue to grow around this and challenge each other. Because, like, I could learn a ton from reading online, but I've learned 100 times more from my conversations with you, and the relationships around that inform all my research. You know what I mean? So it's all an organic living thing.
CCE, and what makes this community so rewarding and so fantastic is that this is not expertise, this is experience.
Right.
It's not knowledge, it's wisdom, right? And that differentiation is what makes this community valuable. When you're going to build a community, it needs to be a wise, experienced community, not an expert community.
Right.
Anybody can reach expertise today through LLMs, books, or whatever. You can fake it until you make it, any day on any topic. Yeah. YouTube will make you an expert in whatever you want, including the neurosurgery if you want to.
Right.
Right. But that's expertise. That's not experience.
Right.
Right. That's knowledge, not wisdom. And the experience and the wisdom trump expertise and expertise, knowledge and expertise by far. And if we are successful in what we're aiming for that experience and that wisdom, not for the expertise and the knowledge.
Right. Well, experience we have, wisdom is a work in progress, but I appreciate the attempts to achieve it with you, Esteban. Thanks for joining me yet again at Constellation.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it.